to prepare for this, I'm just going to give Steve a little announcement beforehand here. And to prepare for this, I started going through some of Steve's accomplishments, and I had to resort to bullet points. Because he's got too many of them. And I'll just make a couple of announcements here in advance. You know that Terroir has been sold out for the first time this year in advance. I don't know if you know, but Steve has been involved with Terroir from the very first one, volunteering there, giving presentations there on publishing. And also for those of us who go up afterwards at the open mic meeting, Steve's been hosting those too. So, Steve, congratulations for your part in the success of Terroir. Of course, Steve also used to, for a number of years, edit the Arts Alliance Yamhill County newsletter, which was quite a lot of work, but also a benefit culturally that everyone knows what's going on. Of course, now if you want to know what's going on the literary scene, you can tune into McMinnville Community Media and watch The Writing Life, which is an excellent show. Goes through a number of writers, poets, all aspects of the writing industry and what's going on here in McMinnville. And that also happens to be hosted by Steve. So that's Steve. So Steve, thank you very much for that. And of course, we're here because Steve is releasing his second book tonight, All Hat. I've been lucky enough to see Steve's books in development, both There's Somebody and All Hat, because we've been in the same writing group for more than 10 years. And it's been a real pleasure. A lot of people come into the writing group and they'll start off at a lower level of skill and work their way up and improve. And some of them come in here, real wise asses. They start off at a high level and then get better. Also, Steve. Not that I resent it, Steve. It's okay. Let's see. Of course, Steve has a lot of time. That's why he's able to do this. With his part-time job managing Habitat for Humanity.
It's not all the time.
Not all. That's a good weekend vacation. So there's that. And of course, the man moved into a house that was unlivable, and then it was part of a tour of houses by the South Slope or something. I mean, he's put the rest of us to shame. I mean, 2 books, editing magazines, newsletters, and it's just too much. You need to calm down and work yourself. So, and along with that, aside from restoring houses that were unlivable and turning them into showplaces, he also has a hobby. That's all of us, and he's got a hobby of woodworking, which he's also excellent at. So, without further ado, I'd just like to say, Steve, slow down a bit.
All right.
And I'll introduce Steve Law.
So the setup here is, the crux of it is Jim's girlfriend is pregnant. What?
Can't hear you.
Back here? There's all. Maybe we should turn it on. And that's not such an unusual circumstance, except that Jim has a tragic past, and that is his sister died in a swimming accident. He was there, he didn't save her, and survivor's guilt, maybe. He feels like the baby that's on the way, he couldn't take care of that baby. And so he thinks it's magnanimous to abandon his girlfriend. That's kind of one of the bad parts. So he's done that. Sort of simultaneously, his parents split. His mom they were in California, she goes to Maine, and that's where this takes up. She has called him. Mom giggles. Jimmy, it is the most exciting thing to get a paycheck. Knowing someone thinks enough of what you do to give you money. Not a relative, not a friend. A stranger gives you money simply because you're worth it. I asked the particulars of the job, and she says she works in a service station. She rings up customers and stocks the shelves at the mini mart. She wants me to come visit, and I say, maybe. when things are slow, when I'm more established. The truth is, I can't imagine the circumstances that would get me there. And then she says, I was so upset when I called before, I forgot to tell you I stopped to see Allison and our little Amanda. Oh, Jimmy, she's precious. Such a little marshmallow. 6 months old, you know. She says this like I might need reminding, like I could ever forget. I don't say anything, and for a moment neither does she. There's a vibration on the line between California and Maine. It's a tension, an expectancy. It's generated by her wanting to say the very thing I don't want to hear. Jimmy, she starts, then hesitates. I want you to know I understand, or at least I understand in part. I know that young people have certain desires and that certain things happen, and these things that happen sometimes have more to do with, here I know she wants to say lust, but instead she says the physical rather than the emotional. But you know, people, men especially, have certain obligations. Obligations before the fact and obligations after the fact. Which brings me to the part I simply don't understand, and especially after seeing the child. I mumbled something in response, but it isn't what I mean. Because what I mean is that my actions are precisely in line with my obligations to their safety and happiness. I don't say this because Mom wouldn't understand. There's no way she could because I don't either. I just know it's true. Before she hangs up, Mom gives me her phone number and address in Maine. She makes me promise to stay in touch with her, to write. And later that evening I do write, but not to Mom. I write to Baby. I tell Amanda, Merry First Christmas. I relate different Christmases I shared with Kitty and different gifts we gave and received. I tell her about buying my mother a silk scarf 5 years in a row after she helped me pick out the first one. I tell her about getting my dad a ball mitt that fit me and not him. I say, last year I got your mother 2 complete outfits and more. Skirts, blouses, sweaters, a coat, a fur hat. I was so in love and she was so beautiful I couldn't stand it. I would have bought out Macy's if it were possible. I ask Amanda what she might get her mother someday, and I offer suggestions. I sign off using words like, good night, my marshmallow, and love. And I write Daddy at the bottom. Then I tear up the letter and throw it away. So he's conflicted. And I wanted to say too, and this is what leads into the second book, one of the things I like about writing is it isn't performance art. So if you're a ball player, you know, and the ball's coming to you, you either catch it or you don't. Or if you're a violinist, you either hit the note or you don't. And so you're judged on that performance that moment. Writing is not cheating, but you can come off kind of a lot smarter than you really are. And I think you see this in Ministries. Charlie, maybe you've done this. You get to the end of the book or near, and then you think, you know, if I would have put the girl in the yellow dress in the beginning, that would be a clue that the people would catch later. And it's like, oh, you're so clever. But in fact, you just go back and do that. So I was to the end of the book, and I thought, you know, I'm looking for something else to do, and I was thinking about, you know, what would that be? And when I came up with the idea of what I wanted this to be, I went back to the first book and put in a scenario that gets the protagonist, Olin, out of this area and into somewhere else. And this is how that happened. A week or so after Halloween, I need a tool that's in the set I loaned Olin. I call his home, but Iris answers and says he isn't there. I ask when she expects him back, and Iris hesitates a minute, then gives me a different number where I can reach him. Something in her voice prevents me from asking what this is about. I dial the number, and after several rings, a young woman picks up. Super 8, Ontario. Owen Yonnicut, please. I hear some keys tap, and then she says, I'll connect you. The phone rings again, but with a different tone this time. And Owen answers, Yeah? What's up, I ask. Hey, Chief, he says, casual as can be. No, I don't mean what's up like hello, I mean what's up? Why are you in a motel? Well, hell, he says, I can't stay with you in that cracker box. He says this with conviction, as if he's actually answered my question. I try a different approach. Why aren't you home? Actually, he says, I've been meaning to talk with you about that. In about 45 seconds, he explains what rightly should take an hour and a half and would take my mother until next Tuesday or possibly next month. Basically, he says that he and Iris have had an argument. This is an unsatisfactory answer because I've seen arguments. I've even been in one or two myself, and none of them ended with either party lugging suitcases to a nearby hotel. But the more important part, for me anyway, is he says he's decided to go home for a while. Not home to Iris, but home to South Dakota, to the ranch. I can't help it. I ask, why? To which he answers in a 3-note sing-song, the verbal equivalent of a shrug. I don't know. This is not convenient. We aren't swamped, but work is steady, certainly more than I can handle alone. It's true I could find some help or decline additional work, but I don't want to do either. More than that, we're in the middle of negotiations on a term loan. By now, our original offer has been rejected, but we've countered, and Norm Jennings says it's under consideration. We've never met the brothers, those mysterious owners of the property, but I hope we do, and I want Owen to be at the meeting. How long do you think you'll be gone? Can't really say. A week, a month? Yeah, more or less. More or less. What about the terminal, I ask? What about work? How can I get hold of you? Of course, I can't actually hear him shake his head, but I know he's doing it. Ace, you're not going to believe this, but folks out where I'm going have indoor toilets and everything. Mom probably still has that old crank-up phone, but if she doesn't, I'll find some way to call. How's that sound? I don't know how it sounds. Yes, I do. It sounds tired. Or is that just me? Sometimes, like now, I get really, really tired. Owen, yeah, but I don't know how to answer. I'm probably taking this harder than I should, but I feel let down, betrayed. Nothing, forget it. Just hurry back, okay? He doesn't say anything, but I can hear him give the receiver a big smacking kiss. So that's all. I really shifted gears when I went to this book, and that is, you'll learn. You know, I think if I was a painter, my second painting would be better than the first. Not that this isn't fabulous, but it's different. And I think I had more confidence. When I wrote this, the way that this starts, it's just right in the scene. And truly, I thought that as a new writer, I might not be given the latitude. I didn't know that the reader would come along with me, so I wanted to get it started right away. This is a little more relaxed, I think. As I say in class all the time, I wanted to render the story, to let it play out. So the deal here is Owen, in fact, he's gone from the first book about 3 weeks. These are the 3 weeks, because he eventually comes back. But he and Iris, his wife, indeed have split up. He's headed back to South Dakota. Fairly early on in the book, there's an accident and he hits a deer. Turns out that it's doe, and he's killed it. Or he thinks he's killed it. He's been a hunter. He knows that he doesn't want to leave a maimed animal at the side of the road. So he's taken a pistol from the trunk. He's going to put it out of its misery. And then this starts. He rocked back the hammer with his thumb and turned his head to the side, shielding himself with his free hand. As he did so, his gaze fell along the deer's torso, and he noted the rib cage no longer rose and fell. He placed his palm in front of her snout. Feeling no breath, he touched her open eye. She did not blink. With simultaneous pressure on the trigger and restraint from his thumb, he eased down the hammer. Owen rocked back on his heels to survey the animal. She had been a sad enough sight on her own, but made sadder now that he had time to study the doe. He didn't want to believe what he should have noticed earlier, though there was now no denying the swollen udder and the distended belly. "You were near your time, weren't you?" he said to her spirit. Owen felt there was nothing he could do, or at least nothing he cared to do. In truth, he had no interest in one more burden, and toting around a newborn would surely qualify as burdensome. He returned to the car with every intention of pushing on. Indeed, he unloaded the gun and repacked it in the duffel, was in the driver's seat with one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the key when he looked back at the doe. He smacked the wheel with his palm. Owen heaved himself from the car. Hurrying now, he peeled off his jacket, letting it drop to the ground. He unbuttoned and rolled his sleeves past the elbows. By the time he was again kneeling beside the animal, he had fished a knife from his pocket and had the blade snapped open. From the time he was a boy, Owen had gutted all manner of animals, fish and birds, deer and elk, so that he was familiar enough with the arrangement of their organs to know what to expect. But he had never before been required to cut a creature with such precision and urgency. On the other hand, as a youngster, he had been present when a similar procedure was performed on hemorrhaging cows, and he figured this must be comparable. In one motion, he drew the blade along a line behind the ribcage from tail to navel, keeping the knife's edge parallel to the carcass so as not to rupture the amniotic sac. With the vein-laced placenta exposed, he pinched up enough of the membrane to safely nick it open, then pushed his fingers inside, lifted, and cut another long slice. Warm liquid spilled out, soaking his knees. He plunged his hand into the cavity and found a leg. As he yanked out the fawn, the umbilical cord snapped free. Owen held the little deer suspended, head down. "Well, aren't you something?" he said. He cleared its mouth with his fingers, then raised it over its head and breathed a great lungful of air into its snout. The fawn did not stir. "Don't you go dying on me after making such a mess of my jeans." He plucked a straw from the earth and stuck it into the fawn's nostril. At that, the deer quivered awake. It was slick, sodden, cold, and trembling, but it was alive. So, I'm a city boy. I didn't know any of this stuff. And because this takes place on a cattle ranch and there's this animal thing, I thought I better find out, can you even do this? And is it possible? And I had the good fortune of interviewing a large animal vet. And he was unlike anybody. I'd called several places and asked to interview them. Nobody was interested, which is probably good because they were kind of cats and dogs and birds and stuff like that. But the fellow that I interviewed was a large animal vet. And so I asked him about all of this stuff. Can you do that? Could you deliver a fawn? And his description is pretty much what he told me. And in fact, all of the things about bringing it awake, the tickling its nose with a straw, all of that came from the vet. And I have to say, this is a guy who deserves his own book. He was a successful veterinarian, and he was also a demolition derby driver. We don't like to do it. His name is Frank Walton, but he gave me a hat and a t-shirt that says Fireball Walton. A month ago or so, I found him and sent him a book. So we're kind of running out of time here, but I'm going to skip to, this is sort of again, it comes late in the book, but I think that there's a psychological motivation. Again, Owen is not a perfect person, but how boring would that be anyway? But he also is conflicted, and I think he's not self-aware. Maybe more to the end. But this will sort of capsulize maybe not a mentor. He's he's thinking about his dad. His dad has died in a tractor accident, and their relationship now can never be healed because the dad isn't there. So this takes place, this is a flashback. Olin at this point is 12, and he's at the funeral. Olin's reverie ended as the pastor concluded the service, and the congregation came forward to file past the casket. They were people Olin knew, were ranchers, men from the stockyards, the auctions, his classmates, their parents. But there was also someone he didn't know. He didn't know the woman who stopped before the casket and planted herself there. Olin got the impression she was talking to his father, and for a one-sided conversation, it was a good one. Olin saw she was a young woman, or at least she wasn't worn down like so many he knew. This one looked like a person who worked indoors, maybe at a Five and Dime or a restaurant. Someone not burned by the sun and the wind. She hadn't come by to hug Martha as the other women had, or even shake her hand as a few of the men did. A boy standing next to her, a boy near Ernie's age, turned from the casket and looked directly at Neil's wife and sons. There was something familiar about the kid. The high forehead, the widespread eyes. At the crown, his hair stuck in all directions, as Owen's did. Owen glanced at his mother to see if she saw what he did, but if so, she gave no sign. The woman gave Martha a fleeting look, then put her hand on the boy's back and guided him out the door. Owen bit down, pressing his teeth together as hard as he could. Who was that? Nobody, Martha answered. No, I mean the woman. She looked at her son. Her smile held neither hope nor goodwill. That's who she is, nobody. At least that's what your father told me. So many fine writers here, and I was thinking about having you guys all stand up. I'm just going to pick on Charlie, who's, by the way, gave me a great blurb here. And I think, Charlie, if I quote this properly, you wondered about if Olin was likable. Is that fair to say? And my answer to Charlie was, when you read this, pay attention to what he says in contrast to what he does. And I think that's kind of the key to him. I don't know that he's tough talking, but he has a swagger, but I think he's good at that. I'm going to leave it at that. If you have a question, I'd be happy to say my best. Literally decades ago, heard a fella say about another guy, he's all hat. And I thought, what? And so then I asked him, and he said, well, he's all hat and no cattle, meaning he's a pretender. So there's that. And I have to tell you, I think probably all readers, certainly all writers, love language. And we have come up with the goofiest ways to say things. And in fact, I actually got to put one in here that I'd heard at work, so this is fairly recently. But the guy said, that's strange as suspenders on a snake. And then I had to put it in here. My brother's father-in-law one time was talking about the weather, and he said, it's colder than $700. Okay. But and actually I got to, because Olin is introduced in this book, he gets to say some things. And there's a point where Jim is thinking about going on and out on his own. These are both truck drivers at an established common carrier. And Jim wants to do something and kind of show and prove himself. He's thinking about going out on his own. And knows that at one time, Olin was an owner-operator. And so he asked him, well, what should I look for? What is it hard? And so on. And then he says to Olin, how come you're not doing it now? And Olin says, it only takes a sip to know what the whole picture tastes like. Yeah.
I'm just really interested in the way you chose the last name Well, Olin, I think, works very well for the first name, but I had not heard the last name. Would you share some of that?
You bet. So in one of my classes, our teacher said, I'll drop a name. Elizabeth George was my mentor, and you may know she's quite a successful author. But she said that the particular protagonist's name should, for the reader, conjure up the person. And so Owen, I picture him as not very tall and kind of round, and when you say Owen, your mouth is kind of round. So that's where that came from. But for a very short time, I sold motorcycles. And I sold a motorcycle to a guy whose name was Yannicka. And I thought, and I love names, so I said, oh, that is so cool. Is that Eastern European? And he laughed and he said, and I believe this is right, it's either Navajo or Apache. And it means gray bear. And I thought, there's my name. That's all I know. And actually, Jim Bass, when you read the first one, his name is Bassovich. And I wanted to do that because I picture that culture as being very patriarchal. And he had such a tough time with his dad. And then he shortens it to Bass, and he does that because I had to type that a lot. So Bass is going to be a lot easier than Bass. Yeah. Anyone? Well, thank you guys. That was great.
Thank you.